Good evening. It is Monday, July the 17th, and it's 7:01 p.m. We will call the Plan Commission meeting to order. Kelly, will you take a roll call?
Okay. Corey Kuntz.
Here.
Dan Bayshore.
Here.
Diane Scott.
Here.
Kevin Krulik.
Here.
Brian Tandy.
Here.
Keith Campbell.
Here.
Heather Schaller.
Here.
Rebecca Stanton.
Here.
Lori Gross.
Here.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, motion second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Any abstains? Okay, carries. I'd like to do the new business first, if that's okay, Ben. We'll do docket, any contention from the commission? Let's do docket 23-48. AAA Development is requesting a development plan approval for the new multi-tenant commercial retail building at 200 Sam Ralston. Matt, will you tell us about that, please?
Sure. Good evening, Commission. Thanks, everybody, for making it out tonight on a rainy evening. We'll get started here. If we want to go ahead and pull up the site map, we'll kind of get you oriented to where we're at. We are just off of Sam Ralston Road. The subject property highlighted in yellow, I-65 all around the west. We've got the White Castle on the south, Quality Inn Hotel on the west. PSG Holdings has an undeveloped parcel to the north, and then Aspire, a mental health facility just to the east. So Sam Ralston Road, just running along the east side of this property. The developer is proposing to construct a 6,000 square foot speculative multi-tenant commercial building, and we'll get into the overview here. So on the site that you're seeing now, north is to your right. So we got west is on the top of the page. Sam Ralston Road is running along the south side of this. So what you can see here in the middle is proposed, again, multi-tenant, a 5-space commercial development. The developer is proposing one end for a drive-through. As you can see, a drive-through window at the end with appropriate queuing lanes along the south and western side of the building. The applicant's also proposing a pickup window on the north side, which is different than a drive-through. A pickup window would just be picking up your order versus a drive-through would be placing an order and then waiting for the food or order to be prepared. On the south side here, we have a shared entrance. That the entrance will be shared with White Castle, just off the screen, and then the Quality Inn Hotel. And then there is an existing cut to the north along Sam Ralston Road. So this development would have full access both on the north and south sides of the development. Two-way traffic is proposed through this main drive aisle, but one-way traffic around the exterior of the building. We have 28 parking spaces that are being proposed, 2 ADA compliant and 2 dedicated motorcycle parking spaces. The applicant is also proposing, as you can see in the green, the appropriate perimeter and perimeter buffer and parking lot perimeter and interior landscaping requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance. So as many of you know, and we'll kind of refresh some and teach others, when a development plan is submitted through our office, it does undergo TAC review, which is the Technical Advisory Committee. This Technical Advisory Committee is made up of all the City of Lebanon utility departments, electric, stormwater, sewer, water, the city engineer, as well as planning staff. The Technical Advisory Committee, or the TAC Committee, submits comments back to the developer based on what they found in review of the development plan. So in this particular situation, Sewer and Water Division has submitted their comments. Electrical, City of Lebanon Stormwater, as well as the Lebanon Fire Department have submitted comments back. The applicant has either satisfied those comments or is in the process of satisfying those requirements. The city engineer has submitted his multi-page comments. Always got to take a dig at Kevin. And then for you tonight, the planning department does undergo the review of the development plan, and we'll kind of walk through those development standards that we take a look at that are before you tonight. First we take a look at the UDO requirements for the development itself. So lot size is taken into consideration, minimum lot frontage, the lot width, front and side setbacks, and the rear setbacks. This particular application does meet or exceed all of those standards when reviewing the planned business commercial zoning district. What's a little bit different before you tonight on this particular application than other development plans is that the applicant does not yet have completed architectural design or drawings of the facility, of the building, so we don't have elevations to show you tonight. So that's a little bit different than other development plans where we could show you a picture of what the developer's proposing as far as the building facade and what those look like. So tonight, we don't have those elevations, so we'll leave it up to you as the commission. One of the conditions that we will be placing on our staff recommendation is that architectural plans will need to be submitted and approved by planning staff that are in line with the Unified Development Ordinance prior to the applicant being able to file for any permits. So that is something that's a little bit different tonight, that we normally have the architectural design, but we don't tonight, but we will require that the applicant does submit those. Or at your discretion, you could choose that you're not comfortable approving it with that condition and suggest continuing this item until the applicant does have those architectural renderings. So we'll leave that up to you to decide tonight. A lighting plan has not yet been submitted, but the applicant will be required to submit a photometric plan that is compliant with the Unified Development Ordinance. I mentioned the landscaping. The landscaping plan that has been submitted does meet all applicable requirements of the UDO. And lastly, a signage plan has not yet been submitted, but that will be one of the conditions that prior to the installation or the issuing of any sign permits, the applicant submit a signage plan that would be in compliance with the Unified Development Ordinance. So in review of the submitted development plan as presented, Lebanon Planning staff does find compliance with the Unified Development Ordinance requirements of the subject site. Staff recommends approval of the subject development plan contingent on the following 4 conditions. So we have 4 conditions on this approval recommendation. First, that the applicant adequately addresses any remaining City of Lebanon Technical Advisory Committee comments prior to the application for any building permits or site improvements. That the applicant submits a lighting and photometric plan that meets all applicable UDO standards for approval prior to submission of permits for site improvements or building construction. The third condition, that the applicant submits a signage package that meets all applicable UDO standards for approval prior to submission for permits of signage. And then lastly, the applicant submits architectural plans and elevation drawings indicating proposed building materials that meet all applicable UDO standards and approval prior to submission of permits for any site improvement or building construction. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of you may have.
Commissioner, any questions for Matt? Okay, hearing none at this time. The applicant care to step forward?
Good evening, Plan Commission. My name is Roger Azar. I'm the design engineer that you saw my plans up there. Matt, thank you for the very thorough explanation. We do intend to meet the 3. We addressed all the engineers' comments. We responded back with a response to comments, including the drainage. So the 3 items that remain are the architectural plan, the lighting plan, and the signage. And the owner has communicated with an architect that will fulfill those requirements. We ask you today to please approve that with the conditions set forth. The site has been a fill area. They brought in a lot of materials, maybe when they built 65 ramp, or maybe when they built the hotel. So there's a lot of studies that we need to complete on the site. We did preliminary geotechnical. We found out that there's quite a bit of fill. So the owner wants to proceed, but he is very reluctant to spend any more money because it's going to be costly without your approval. With the other 3 items being conditional, obviously he's not going to get a building permit until those conditions are met. So we please ask your consideration to approve that so he can continue moving forward with this development. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Thank you. Any questions for Roger?
Do they have any idea on what type of businesses they're identifying to go in there?
I know one. AAA Plumbing, which is the owner of the company, is
Okay.
going to use one of those 5 units.
Okay,
And obviously, with the drive-throughs on both sides, those are most likely to be some kind of restaurant or food services. We designed them in the fashion to have the drive-through and to have the all water separators before it goes to the sewer, considering that that could be an option for the developer. What's in the middle? It's a hit or miss. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments yet?
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Roger. We're now open for a public hearing. If you would, sign in there and try to limit to 3 minutes or so.
I am already signed in. Most of you know me. My name is Melissa Gerard. I am here tonight in my capacity as General Counsel for PSG Logistics and an owner of PSG Logistics. As most of you probably know, PSG Logistics purchased a couple of years ago the old USA Fireworks building. We've made a lot of very expensive improvements to that building and have a substantial investment in this community. And in fact, I think Molly Whitehead's going to be out there tomorrow touring our facility. We do have an outlot in the front of our building, and the intent is to sell that for commercial development at some point ourselves. We are not opposed to this project, but good development breeds good development, and bad development, well, that could kill our project too. So my concern is just about the number of loose ends that are hanging out on this project, and particularly the drainage. I would say the reason that this is before you in a development plan approval is the legislative body decides that there are a couple of kinds of projects and applications that need a little more review by this body. It's your only opportunity to weigh in on the issues on this project. It's our opportunity as the public to weigh in on this project. If you approve it conditionally and send it back to staff, neither you nor we have any more input on this project or any of the items involved. That said, I would have liked to have seen some elevations, but I particularly want to focus in on the drainage comment. Jeff, can you help me here? Pass these out. There is a significant amount of fall between, I want both of them. Between the PSG property and outlot and the property that they're going to develop. As you can see from this map, from the south side of their property at 930 to our driveway, it's about 7 feet of fall, 930 to 923. So the water's all coming towards us. And on top of that, I want to show you some items. Is this working, Ben? Can I show these?
I'll pop it on.
How do I?
They'll give it, just a second.
Well, I guess I'm not going to be able to do that.
It's there.
Just give them a
Oh,
minute.
is it up there? Okay, great. So as you can see from some of their cross-section profiles, they're going to be raising the entire site. That's the highlighted area is fill, and that's right where the drainage is. They're going to be raising the entire site in different places by about 4 to 5 feet. The whole site is going to be about 929 feet. So that's many feet of fall onto our property. Their proposed drainage outlet, well, it's not really an outlet. They're just going to open the floodgates and let everything flow into what they call a swale. It's not really a swale out there. It's very flat up there. There is no swale on Sam Ralston Road. And they're just going to let the water flow unimpeded from their property line to ours and to the roadway as well. Carrie Daly, who, for those of you who might be new to this plan commission, is the outside drainage consultant for the city of Lebanon at Christopher Burke. And he caught this issue right away. And he indicated that the drainage outlet should be piped. Our northern property line between PSG Logistics and Menards is a big legal ditch. It's a very deep legal drainage, it's county legal drain. He indicated that they wanted the stormwater discharge to be piped all the way from their northern property line through the right-of-way for Sam Ralston Road to that ditch at the intersection of Sam Ralston Road and the ditch. We also have no objection to providing them and working with them on a drainage easement of some sort if that's not the appropriate location to put it. But we've really had no communication whatsoever from them. They entered onto our property without consent or knowledge and drove a PK nail through our driveway, and that's about the only extent of communication we've had from them. But that said, we have no intent to charge them for a drainage easement. We just think it's in the best interest of your roadway, of our potential future development of the outlot, and for their project as well, to pipe the water underground all the way to the drainage ditch. We may talk about routes, we may talk about restoration of our property when they're through, but I don't intend to charge them for the easement itself. They said that they have addressed Carrie Daly's comments, but this is what their response was. It's here highlighted. Basically saying we weren't going to address Carrie Daly's comment with regard to piping that discharge all the way to the drainage ditch and the culvert there. There is an issue, apparently they say, I don't know, I haven't seen the engineering on it. I would like to see the engineering on it with cover, but there are a lot of solutions for cover. They can bring in more cover, they can lower the pipe, they can choose a different size or shape of pipe that will get them more cover. We can talk about a different route because the property is lower towards Sam Ralston Road than it maybe is in the back. Maybe we can run them through the back of our property. There are a lot of different options there, but they haven't even begun to communicate with us or show us how this isn't feasible. But I think it's just in the best interest of the city of Lebanon and of other future development in this town in terms of our outlot if we spend a little more time thinking about this drainage other than giving a rubber stamp approval right now. I really think that the best solution is for piped drainage to that county legal drain. And I would encourage you to continue this matter at the very least, to ask them to communicate and coordinate with us about the drainage options and to work through Carrie Daly's comment in that regard.
Thank you, Melissa.
Any more?
Any other public comment regarding this project? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Any further comments or questions to Ben or the applicant?
Question to Ben or Matt, yeah.
And then we'll respond to some of that. Or let Ben.
Is there there's also going to be an increased traffic flow at that intersection. Was a traffic study done for increased traffic flow already?
For a single building like this, we typically wouldn't, and we don't know what the uses are, so we wouldn't even know what inputs to put into a traffic study. So until we know what uses are, there's not a whole lot we could do. So, and obviously, as you know, Sam Ralston Road and State Road 32, there's limited access there already. So, so yeah, until we know what the uses are, we wouldn't really know what the inputs are to know whether there is an impact or not. Maybe in terms of the drainage, I'll defer to Kevin and Roger. I know there's been some communication between Kevin, Carrie, and Roger about the discussion about piping, et cetera. So I'll let the experts discuss that one as opposed to a planning guy trying to discuss what exactly needs to be done in terms of coming up with a solution on the drainage. So,
And Ben, just to be clear, that they have to meet every single UDO standard if we would approve this tonight.
yeah, they would have to meet every
Elevation and
standard.
everything.
And what Matt had suggested is that typically we do have the elevations. I mean, you know, like the lighting and the signage, those are pretty objective standards. You either meet them or you don't. There is some subjectivity, obviously, to whether what a building looks like, and it may meet the standards. It may not still be a good looking building. We may want to have adjustments to. So, again, like Matt suggested, if that's something that you're just not comfortable approving it with that condition, we totally understand that, and you can go ahead and continue the item until they have a chance to put those elevations together. But so that is one where typically we would not approve with that condition because there is some subjectivity to building elevations. But That's totally up to your discretion how you want to move forward with that. But, and certainly, until all of the drainage stuff is totally worked out between Kevin, Carrie, and Roger, this project isn't moving forward regardless of what you guys decide to do tonight.
Kevin, do you have any comments for the drainage?
I think Ben summed it up. I know Roger has responded to my comment letter. I've not had a chance to review his comments. But my position, and I believe Carrie's position, remains a pipe stormwater outlet from the site. It is very common that this body would take action, and the condition of the approval of this body would be subject to drainage approvals. But I would agree with Ben, it's pretty uncommon that we would pending architectural review.
Just for my knowledge and maybe everyone else's, so in this case, let's call the applicant parcel A, parcel B's next to it before you get to the legal drain, right, or legal outlet, which would be the creek, swale, whatever we want to call it, right? Who owns the pipe once it's in the ground? So if we're going to pipe all the way from parcel A past B and into the drain.
Generally speaking, if a pipe is in,
Assuming
pipes
it's-
can be dedicated to the public, but generally speaking, on private development projects, the city doesn't usually entertain the option of accepting long-term maintenance of those pipes.
So even though it's in a right-of-way, it would still
Well,
be
if
owned by
it's-
parcel
If
A?
it's in our right-of-way, in the right-of-way for the street, that's where we would entertain the option of accepting it. We would not entertain accepting a storm sewer piece of infrastructure on private property regardless of the easement structure.
So if this structure were to go within the right-of-way, it would then be essentially paid for by parcel A and then subsequently owned by the city. And parcel B would have access via tap fees?
No, storm sewer doesn't really run like water and sewer utilities are, so there's not.
So they just
tap or
get the
connection
access
fee.
to the pipe at no cost? Got it.
Yeah, any other comments, questions for Ben or the applicant?
May I address the storm issue?
Yes.
Thank you. We cannot, as the site sits right now, and going, unless we go onto the neighbor's property, we cannot have a pipe going down to the legal drain. There is a driveway with a culvert, and we took the invert of that culvert and we ran it back to our ponds, and that's how we came up with the fact that we cannot fit a pipe in there. It'll come out of the ground. The pipe sits on top of the ground. So it's not possible to put a pipe in there unless we put a pipe and then we fill about 2 feet on top of the pipe, which will take us about to the edge of where the sidewalk is. And that would require for the neighbor to allow us, one, an easement for the pipe, and two, do construction on their property and change the terrain. That's why the pipe was not recommended. Also, the drainage meets the drainage code. It is not free flow. There's a 4-inch restrictor on the outlet of the pond. There are 2 ponds there. The majority of the site is eaten up by those 2 big ponds, and the reason those ponds are there is to hold the water and meter it out at a post-construction rate that is equal or less than the pre-construction rate. That's the drainage code, and we follow the drainage code. So it's not going to be unrestricted flow going into that ditch. When I responded back to Mr. Carey that we cannot put a pipe in just because it sits on the ground, he said, okay, why don't you go collect some more data and show me that there is a ditch there? We went and collected more data, and we digitized it, and we showed him that there was a ditch there. And there is indeed a swale, but with the 4-inch restrictor, we should not be pushing unrestricted water on there. We are restricting the water. The ponds will hold water. In a 100-year storm, for instance, they will fill up, and then they will meter the water out at the 4-inch orifice rate until it empties out. That is the reason why we don't have a pipe there. We just simply we'll have to cut their driveway, the neighbor's driveway, to get the pipe down to the legal drain. If that is a consideration and it's allowed, then we will take that into consideration. But typically, when you design, you don't assume that you're going to cut people driveways. You don't assume that you're going to just lay a pipe on the ground. And you definitely don't assume that they're going to allow you to fill in 3 feet or 4 feet of fill to cover your pipe. That's kind of where we are. If there is a change in thought and we could do any of those options, then we will reconsider. But right now, with the culvert that is crossing the driveway, that is my restrictor to where I can pull back into the ponds, and I cannot put a pipe in there. I could,
Can I respond? Yeah, possibly.
Been told no. Okay. Thank you, Roger.
yeah.
Any other comments from the commission?
I do have a question,
Go
because I'm new to this. So let's say the development continues. What happens if the drainage is a problem? Will that be your company's responsibility then to correct it after the fact?
It would be the developer's responsibility, but when we do the modeling, again, you know, Christopher Burke, I mean, they wrote the rules for drainage, and they're the ones reviewing them. And if we meet the requirements, by design, if we meet the requirements that the city of Lebanon has, you know, yes, can we have a 500-year storm? Absolutely. Will the ponds fail? Yes, but I think you have bigger problems than the ponds if we have a 500-year storm. You know, with the modeling, the way the storms are, the model output, you know, we use HydroCAD, everybody else uses HydroCAD. It's not something new that we created. We use the model, we design for the model, and the outflow is allowed under the City of Lebanon rules. So we meet the requirements. Could there be circumstances where there's extensive amount of waters? Absolutely. I cannot tell you no, because we used to get, you know, 1% chance of having a 100-year storm. Now we get them 3 or 4 times a year. So yes, there could be certain situations where there would be overflow, but everything else is going to be flooded at that point.
Thank you. Seeing no more comments, I'd entertain a motion for docket 23-48.
This was supposed to be the easy one, right? I would actually, I would make a motion that we table 23-48, continue it to the next meeting, just to have a little more clarity on a few of these items, including the elevation. So I think there is a drainage question, but I think the elevation piece is pretty important to this body. So that is my motion.
And I'll second that.
I got a motion and a second. Kelly, will you call the roll?
Corey Kuntz,
Yes.
Dan Bayshore,
Yes.
Diane Scott,
Yes.
Kevin Krulik,
Yes.
Brian Tandy,
Yes.
Keith Campbell,
Yes.
Heather Schaller,
Yes.
Rebecca Stanton, Lori Gross.
Yes.
Yeah, that will be continued to the next meeting. And that'll be August the 21st. Okay. Next, we'll move to docket 23-45. It is a PUD rezone request for approximately 6,000 acres associated with the LEAP Innovation Project, or district, I'm sorry. Ben, whenever you're ready.
All right, let me wake this computer up again here. So I'm going to give a very brief introduction and then turn it over to the consulting team to walk through everything with you. Some of my comments will relate to both the PUD ordinance and the next item on the agenda, the comprehensive plan update that we're doing. Just a reminder again of the process that we've gone through over the last couple of months. We engaged a consultant a few months ago to start working on this, and then we had an introduction to this body the last month where we kind of walked through the broad goals and strategies for what we're doing with the PUD ordinance and the comprehensive plan update, and then walk through how we felt like this document was going to be structured and the elements that we were going to be addressing in the PUD ordinance. And asked for any comments from the Plan Commission members at that time and the public, and then we then had a couple weeks later, actually about a couple weeks ago, we held an open house here in this building, invited anybody who might be interested in seeing more information. At that meeting, we did have some additional information about the PUD ordinance standards that were displayed up on boards around the room back over here, and allowed public comment and questions at that time. I think we had 27 people, if I'm not mistaken, that came to that. Most people were just trying to digest information. We did get one written comment at that time, but everybody else was primarily just trying to digest everything that was there. So since that time, there's been a lot of massaging and comments and revisions, et cetera, getting us to the point where we had a draft that we sent you about a week ago for you guys to start reviewing, and then we also posted it online. In terms of what we posted online, we did not receive any additional direct comments from anybody who might have viewed it online to me, but I know there was some discussion on social media, et cetera, but there may be some additional comments you guys hear tonight at the meeting. But we did not receive any in our office that we needed to address. That being said, this document has continued to be massaged since we sent it to you a week ago. So what we just distribute to is another draft, and when they get in their discussion, we can also pull it up so they can show it too. Primarily, it was cleaning up the definitions section, clarifying some other things. There's a couple minor substantive changes that we'll make sure to walk through also, but this was primarily just cleaning up and make sure all of the definitions matched and all the terms matched, so we weren't recreating terms that we already had in our existing UDO, and so adjusting some of those things too. So we just want to make sure to get that in your hands, and they'll walk through those things with you here in a little bit. What we'd be looking for then is, as in terms of the PUD ordinance, we'd be looking for a recommendation from this body tonight. If there are any comments that we need to add into the draft, we would make sure that any recommendation you made was subject to those revisions that you request. Assuming that we do get that recommendation from this body tonight, it would go to the Common Council at their meeting next Monday evening as an introduction of the ordinance, and then there will be additional comment at that time at the council meeting next week. And then 2 weeks, or I guess 3 weeks after that, then at the first council meeting in August, the ordinance would be up for consideration for adoption. So that's roughly the process we've had. This will be our third public meeting now. There'll be a fourth public meeting of the council next week, and then 3 weeks later, then they'll be up for potential adoption. So that's generally the process on the PUD ordinance. In terms of the comprehensive plan, we talked about it a little bit last time. We're really looking to essentially memorialize the LEAP district in our comprehensive plan and address all those areas that we think might be part of the LEAP district in the future. The comprehensive plan, the process is a little bit different. Again, this body's responsibility is the same to provide a recommendation that we'll be seeking from you guys tonight, and then that would be adopted via resolution by the council. Will take one meeting, so theoretically at the meeting next Monday evening, that could be adopted via resolution, and it would amend the comprehensive plan. At that time, then we'd be working with the consultants to update our comprehensive plan website, get all the information that they'll show you here tonight, plus some additional details about the LEAP district concept plan. Just get into further details about the land uses, road cross sections, all that good stuff that you guys have already seen. So that's a real quick rundown from me, just a quick introduction, but we'll turn it then over to the applicants here. They'll do some further introductions, and then I'll also pull up their presentations so they can start walking through that with you as well while they're coming up.
Thank you, Ben.
Scott Alexander, outside counsel for Indiana Economic Development Corporation, representing them, who is the ultimate applicant in this case. As I mentioned last month at the meeting, I think I want to provide some overall context of why we're here, what we're asking for, and then I'll turn it over to the consultant that we've retained to go through some of the specifics. In the first phase of the annexation of the overall LEAP area, there was 1,500 acres approximately that was annexed into the city of Lebanon. As this Area Plan Commission is aware, approximately 600 acres of that original Phase 1 area has now been purchased by Eli Lilly and Company for its approximately $3.7 billion investment for its pharmaceutical campus. That area is not subject to any of the proceedings today. The Lilly site has its zoning, construction is underway. The remaining approximately 1,000 acres of that Phase 1 area is part of what we're here today, along with the Phase 2 annexation area that was completed in December of this year, which was about 5,200 acres of property. So that area, which was about 1,000 acres of the Phase 1 annexation that is into the city, and then the Phase 2 annexation that has been recorded in the city, is what we call the LEAP district that is subject to the Planned Unit Development Ordinance. I wanted to make that clear. Some additional context. As some may know, the Phase 2 annexation of the 5,200 acres-ish was appealed, and there was litigation related to that matter. A court has determined that that annexation was lawful and ordered as such, and therefore the annexed territory is, as of today, in the city of Lebanon, so it is lawfully subject to the proceedings today. One thing that was still up in the air was a challenge to the zoning assigned to the area south of the rail trail for the Phase 2 annexation area. That area, as you all may recall, is subject to what's called the LEAP district zoning classification. That classification was sought at the time because we were not in a position to put together a comprehensive planned unit development for the whole district, but it was important to get that zoning in place, in particular for a semiconductor entity that is very interested in potentially investing up to $50 billion in a part of that area south of the rail trail. So it was very important to get that done, and we are appreciative of the Plan Commission and the Council to accommodate that. But today, what we're here to do is then present the comprehensive planned unit development ordinance that we anticipated that would happen and what we told you would happen. We estimated it would be March, but sometimes things take a little longer, and that's all right because we want to get it right. So what we have done is we took public comment, we provided a draft to the city, had multiple meetings with the city and other stakeholders, took those comments and incorporated them into what was sent to you about a week ago. Over that time, though, we didn't stop listening to folks based upon comments, questions, et cetera, some of which occurred at 5 p.m. on Friday of last week. We listened to those, and we continued to incorporate those comments into the draft. What you have before you really does three things since the original draft was sent to you. Number one, and most expansive, it clarifies and becomes very specific, even more specific, related to various definitions throughout the ordinance. For example, we use the term corridor in the ordinance. We now have subcategories of corridor in the definition section because we wanted to be very specific to allow the Plan Commission and others to understand what we're talking about when it's an eco corridor versus a road corridor related to those things. And it's important that those are consistent with the city's UDO as well. And so I would say 95% of the changes that you have before you relate to incorporating specificity for those definitions in conjunction with discussions with the city. And we wanted to put those in front of you today as part of this process. We understand you may not be able to read all of those right now, and I get that. But what we also have committed to do is we're seeking an approval of this, and we're fine with having conditions that we have additional discussions to clarify any definitional issues with the city. and we'll continue to do that. We've met with Mr. Shine, we've met with Mr. Bontrager and Mr. Reynolds related to those. But there are two substantive changes in the last week, and we'll talk about those in more detail, and I wanted to just preface those. And they relate to solar energy and wind energy infrastructure. We'll get into that more later on, but we looked at the comments and the questions that were received, got additional input from the city, and you will see that the solar infrastructure, for example, is not allowed if it's utility based in the perimeter boundaries for the facilities. So it would be allowed in essence like an Eli Lilly. They have some solar along their perimeter area. But if you're going to have utility grade, somebody selling power back to the grid, it would not be allowed there, and that's a change. We believe it's a positive change for those that are concerned. The same goes with wind. If it's an accessory use to the facility where they're just using that solar like Eli Lilly would use back to the facility, that would be permitted, but otherwise it would be unpermitted. As part of that change as well, it's a conditional use as to whether to, for you all, the city, to approve any solar or wind that would be utility grade, where it would be for wholesale. So it is not an automatic permitted use. We also think that provides, hopefully, some comfort to those that have concerns about that, because that would have to go through city channels, plan commission channels, or through the hearing officer to get approved. So hopefully that provides the context of what we're doing today. IEDC has hired MKSK, which has great experience throughout the state and the country putting together very large planned unit developments, ordinances like this one. And so what I will do is turn it over to MKSK unless there are any initial questions. There's about a 30-page slide presentation, because as you take this very seriously, because this is a very large PUD, so do we. And we want to err, if any, on the side of providing too much information or too much detail rather than not enough. And so we're here today to answer any questions. But again, what we're hopeful is at the end of the day that we will get a recommendation for approval. And if you folks have some conditions that you would like to accompany that, we're certainly amenable to that. Any initial questions before I turn it over to MKSK? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Scott.
Good evening.
Hi.
Good evening.
My name's Aaron Kowalski. I'm an urban planner with MKSK. Pleased to be with you this evening. I'm going to go through these slides fairly quickly, and then we can go back to things. Ben, I might ask you, how do I bring this up on screen? Oh, perfect. We're good.
Just look away for like 3 seconds,
There
and
we
by
go.
the time you look
And
back,
I'm going to try to make this full
magical.
screen so it's a little bit larger. So we previewed both the work for the PUD as well as the comprehensive plan amendment last time. And so I'll kind of give a high-level overview, and then as Scott mentioned, we can bring the draft ordinance up, go through some of those substantive changes, and explain in as much detail as you'd like the different concepts that are before you for consideration today. So as you're looking at this ordinance, it is a very comprehensive document. I would maybe argue that this is one of the most comprehensive PUDs that has been developed in the state of Indiana. And so we've taken this seriously. We've worked for a number of months to arrive at this moment where we feel that this draft is ready for your review and consideration. And so as we're going through this together, there is a general outline. We reviewed that with you. There's references within this PUD back to the city's Unified Development Ordinance. We've cross-checked this ordinance with the city's Unified Development Ordinance to make sure that there was congruity between the standards. And so you'll see references as we go through. And then we've also developed what we feel are a lot of innovative standards and approaches to ensure that the intent of the LEAP master plan as, you know, a significant economic driver for the city, the region, and the state, as well as an opportunity to really build upon the high quality of community that is here in Lebanon, is brought forward. So there's a lot of things here that are very innovative. And so we'll kind of go through those, but a few things to point out. Stormwater. We have paid a lot of attention to how we're going to deal with stormwater in these sites. Where possible, we're trying to think through a district-wide stormwater approach. We're trying to enhance existing wooded buffers and streams that may exist in this district. So as you all are going through the ordinance, that's one particular thing that is unique about this development. And the goal there is really to create large naturalized buffers that not only can retain stormwater, but also could be amenitized with trails, parks, as part of creating a sense of community and place here. So that's one big piece. We've also taken a look at different ways technology can be brought to the forefront, different kinds of uses that are very innovative for this kind of district, and we've looked all over the country at similar districts and developments. We've been out to North Carolina to visit the Triangle District, and really are trying to think through kind of the best of the uses that really could be attracted to this area. And then we've written additional standards for a lot of those uses in the protection of the community. Other things that we've done that may be a little different than what you've seen, very robust landscape standards that complement those stormwater standards. We'll talk a lot about perimeter buffers here in a few moments, and how impactful those can be in protecting the edges of the district from those residential or agricultural property owners that may be outside of the overall LEAP district. And then a few other things just to point on, lighting. Light pollution it was another major concern that we've heard through this process. And so we've put together what we feel is a very innovative approach towards minimizing, the amount of light pollution that these users will put off. And so the standards are called dark sky standards, and I'll talk to you what that is as well. So, you know, this ordinance that we have before you today, it is a full-blown PUD. It's gone through full legal review, and it has a number of supporting exhibits that are at the end as well, and we'll go through what that means. And then as far as this is concerned, there's also kind of the administrative function of it. So it works with the city's existing UDO and PUD process, which allows for this to be set up in such a way. There's rules of construction, there's definitions. As Scott mentioned, we've paid a lot of attention to definitions, and we're really trying to tighten those up at this point in time for the benefit of the community. As far as the zoning is concerned, this whole area is the LEAP zoning, but what we've devised are sub-districts within those that have their own set of standards, and we'll go through that in a moment as well. Just as a reminder, this is the LEAP district concept plan. In general, this is a land use plan. This is really what depicts the general area. It will serve as the regulating plan as development comes to the table. In general, there's 3 sub-districts here: advanced manufacturing in the light purple, mega-site development in kind of the dark purple, and then what we call a mixed-use village center in the yellow. You'll also see some areas identified in green. And as far as the concept plan is concerned, we talked about that kind of larger development scale stormwater approach. We'd like to really focus in on those areas and direct some really innovative stormwater approaches to those places. This is a traditional PUD in that it has a list of permitted and conditional uses, as well as some expressly prohibited uses. And as you're aware, the city has additional conditions that can be put upon conditional uses as we're going through this ordinance. We've illustrated some of those for some specific uses where there's things that, for instance, the IDC wants to make sure are covered as a development comes to the table with a potential conditional use. And then you all, as a plan commission, can, of course, add additional conditions. As we look at development standards and design standards, I'll point to a couple things that we feel are very innovative, but then also offer significant protections for adjacent properties outside of the LEAP district. So I mentioned natural corridors. So in general, those would be existing stream corridors that may fall on the outside of the district or they may fall within the district. And we really want to enhance those. A lot of them are channelized ditches at this point, but there's really an opportunity to bring back and really pay attention towards, the term is replumbing, but thinking about how we really can direct stormwater to areas that are naturalistic, that would include wetlands, so that stormwater could be cleansed before going into that area. And then, of course, developing amenities. As far as the setback is concerned, within those areas, for industrial uses, it would be a 500-foot minimum building setback, and then what we've baked in is what we call a sliding scale setback. You'll also see this for the district perimeter, but what that requires is, in the case of a natural corridor, is a 5-foot increase in setback for every 1 foot in height over the 75-foot. And for uses that would be 75 foot and under, the 500 is the minimum. So within that natural corridor, there's also a requirement for what we call greenbelt buffers or landscape buffers. And so we'll go through that in a moment, but what that means is if you have a 500-foot minimum buffer, several hundred feet of that in this instance may be landscaped or restored creeks and streams. And that would be part of the development. That would be part of the requirements of the development. And the goal there is that they could put a lot of their stormwater in more of a naturalistic way and landscaping to create buffers in this area. On the perimeter, it's really important to note that we have researched all over the country, and we feel based on our research that this 500-foot minimum perimeter district buffer, and by perimeter, I mean the perimeter of the LEAP district. So if you were to take the district, right, and then inset 500 feet as a minimum, that's your minimum buffer in the district for these industrial uses. And what that also means is that it would have that step up, but the step up is even more significant. It's 5 foot an increase for every 1 foot in setback for a building over 50 feet. So if you have a 50-foot building or less, you still have that 500 feet. And in addition to that, on the perimeter, there's a 160-foot landscaped buffer that's required, and the goal there and the standards is that it would be resemblant of a kind of wooded area or wooded edge. So there's significant buffers that we're including as we think about industrial sites in this mega site zone. As far as building heights are concerned, I mentioned the sliding scale setback. We capped building heights at 250 foot, and then we've capped accessory building heights at 300 foot or 150% of the total primary building height, whichever is less. And what that allows for is things that may require a large tower or emission controls or things like that to exceed that that height restriction. But it's also important to note that with that sliding scale setback, you're going to be getting near a 1,500-foot setback if you have that type of height. I'll keep going through. So advanced manufacturing is the other district we talked about. This district has a similar sliding scale perimeter setback along the LEAP district. Along the natural corridor and the road corridors, it does not have the sliding scale setback, but still has a pretty significant setback at 300 foot along a major corridor. A state highway, for instance, would be a major corridor. There's parking setbacks built into that as well. Along the natural corridor, it would be a 400-foot minimum. The height is significantly less on the advanced manufacturing sites, so that justified the step down. Along the perimeter, you have that same degree of intensity with the district perimeter with the 300-foot minimum buffer there with a 5-foot increase for every 1 foot in height over 50 feet. And then that 160-foot required planted buffer is a requirement within this area as well. So this kind of breaks it all down here. But you can see, you know, we've put a lot of thought and attention in what happens in these setbacks. Parking can occur, but not within the area of that 160-foot greenbelt or landscape buffer. Within that buffer, you can have roadways, you can have sidewalks and trails, you can have fencing, things for public safety. That's about it, and it's a heavy landscape buffer. 160 feet is a large, expansive area. And this is an example of graphically how this might lay out. So what you're seeing here is on the bottom of the screen and the top of the screen, and this is a large site, is an example of that 160-foot roadway greenbelt, okay? And then within that also, you see the 500-foot setback, and you see parking. Well, parking's got to be, 200 feet out. So essentially, you've got that 160 foot, then another 40 foot, then you can start to have parking. And the goal there is that with that 160 foot district perimeter greenbelt, which is heavily landscaped, once those trees have matured, you will not see that parking at all. There also may be fences and berms that are required as part of that as well to provide more of a quicker impact as trees do grow over time. And then back into that 500-foot setback for the example of the mega site, you could have those smaller buildings within, as long as you satisfy that 500. But if you had a building that is 150 feet in height, you're getting really close to a 1,000+ foot setback. And so this is really creating a significant, what we feel is a significant buffer. And as we've done research throughout the country, this is one of the most expansive buffers that and approaches that has been taking towards protecting the boundary of these districts, and then also creating these significant greenbelts that over time will naturalize and could be wildlife corridors, could also allow for stormwater to be contained and retained in an innovative way. Residential setbacks, there was some concern about how a development might work with an existing residential. And so we've put together the same level of standards that we shared with the prior one there. That large setback, the 160-foot greenbelt in that area as well. Hey, thank you. And then you can kind of see on the right-hand side of the screen how the properties would, whether or not they're on a road or not, be protected by that greenbelt. And then there's, an additional building setback. Parking could be in that building setback, but then even with a 50-foot tall building, you're several hundred feet away from that development. So that's an additional way that the IEDC felt that we could accommodate and ensure that residents today, as well as in the future that might be on the perimeter, or if there's property owners within the interior of the LEAP district that choose to remain in their home, that they would have that significant and protective buffer as well.
Real quick, just for confirmation. So the slide directly before that had the road frontage with the setbacks. So even if that residential were at the side of that building, it would require those setbacks as well. So it's not from the front, it's from whichever side that residential is on, correct?
That's correct, yeah. So that's why we have both the roadway setbacks and the interior setbacks, is to try to create protection from all angles, because we know that there's going to be some instances potentially where there isn't a road that is buffering between a residential property and that of an industrial property. In a lot of cases, it will be a road because most people are situated on county roads. But we wanted to make sure we baked that protection in just in case.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
The mixed-use district, we've talked a little bit about this. The idea is that this is another area that, as it's developed, would be buffered. So as we were thinking about the map that I showed earlier, there's the creek that kind of goes through the middle of the site, kind of meanders from the north down to the southeast. And so the idea there is north of that and also along the Big Four Trail, we could begin to see a mixed-use area develop. We've put together fully baked standards for a mixed-use walkable district that really could service this district. There's appropriate uses associated with that. We think this could be a significant opportunity for people to live very near where they work as this area develops over time. Think about trail-oriented development. Think about, Midtown Carmel, maybe with a little drop down in scale, but think about how the Monon's been activated through there. That's really how we've written these standards around the Big Four. And the idea is to allow for what we call mixed-use town center, which is mixed-use and multifamily development in certain areas, allow for kind of a step down that would be smaller scale multifamily and townhome development, and then also potential for single-family development in this area as well. And I think that would be further defined as a development plan might come before you in the future, but we wanted to allow for that zoning to be in place if that right development came to the table, so that it could be considered as part of this process. Other standards that we've brought to the table and worked very closely with the city on are how do we make kind of the aesthetics of these buildings that are developed, whether or not they're industrial or commercial or even residential in nature. How can we make sure that we are really allowing for this to develop in a way that's very intentional? We've heard a lot about what people don't like about some of the development that has occurred over the last several years along our major interstate corridors. So we've taken a lot of that into account. So we've thought through heights, encroachments, locations, where to site a building, how the building should face a major corridor, and then also what are some architectural performance standards? And by performance, I don't mean sustainability at this point, but I mean more design standards. Where should facades be broken up? Where should materials change? How should we treat corners? These are additional standards that we've included both in the PUD itself as well as the design guidelines. And so the goal would be, as a petitioner might come to the city can sit down with the design guidelines and say, let's really think about how we can achieve something of this quality, and oh, by the way, we require this in the PUD as well. Antagonotony, you guys probably see that in a lot of the developments that you may have seen, but we require that for all districts. And so the goal there is that we're trying to not create no-place architecture. We really want to emphasize architecture that creates quality of place, whether or not you're in a mega site or in the mixed-use district. Other things that are important to include are robust storage, dock doors, mechanical installations, and loading standards and service standards. We've written those in. Those are also heavily buffered and landscaped. And the other component of that is they need to be sited in such a way that's intentional. In some cases, a traffic study might be required to make sure that a loading area is properly sited along a corridor and it's not causing a traffic issue. And then from an environmental perspective, we've done a lot of research on best practices throughout the country and are really trying to bring some of those forward to this district. I'll tell you that some of the users, Lilly being one, are very interested at a national and international level at being at the forefront of thinking about energy, thinking about materials, thinking about how they develop a site in a way that can attract top talent, but then also be light in impact, knowing that they are developing a large site. Parking, we've thought a lot about parking. I'll tell you, a lot of these big users likely will do their own parking study, but we have some baseline standards that also respect the standards in the UDO. And then we've been thinking about, shared parking or reduced parking or new technologies tied to parking, electric vehicles and things like that that need to get integrated into the standards. And you see the image on the top right. The parking lots need to have significant landscaping and stormwater features, things like that. So we built that into the standards as well. Bike parking is also included, as well as how those different parking types work together to really create a shared transportation system that's not just about parking and going to your destination, really thinking about parking once. I talked a little earlier about roadway greenbelts. We feel that this is a really innovative way of thinking through these corridors, but then also providing significant buffering areas and then also a place for stormwater to be occurring. So I mentioned the 160-foot buffers in some of the interior areas. There's an 80-foot buffer as well. We had several conversations with folks advocating for the Big Four Trail, and we've got a 60-foot roadway greenbelt from the center line of the trail as well. So we've been thinking through what that means and then also, where it goes in the benefit. And this is just an illustration. This is not a perfect example, but you can begin to see how you have a very significant buffer that starts to fill in, and that trees and landscaping would be clustered. This area would be included, trees of different sorts with a focus on natives, really trying to promote Indiana native trees here, as well as shrubs that would be required, grasses that could then be planted to create kind of a prairie type buffer that would create additional screening in the area. And then you can see, again, just as a reminder, as we think about these buffers and how they're intentionally landscaped, the idea is to try to create something that's naturalistic, something that is resilient, that's relatively low maintenance, but then also is really kind of building upon these areas. We talked a little bit about parking already, but I think it's just important to reinforce that we're really trying to bring some of the best practices to the table as we think about parking, as we think about buffers, screening, as well as things like fences and walls, and we've got pretty robust standards for those as well. Signage, we've looked at the city's UDO. We've brought forward some of those standards and definitely respect those standards. We've included some additional standards, and especially in respect to, and as I mentioned, the dark sky friendly goals. That applies not only for buildings, but it applies for signage as well. So the way Dark Sky works is, and it's a national organization, international organization that's really trying to think about how do we reduce light pollution, how do we reduce energy usage. In particular, and just kind of break it down in a very simple way, we've really looked at what are the minimum amount of lighting intensity, it's called foot candles, but the minimum amount of lighting intensity that's required when a particular use is operational, when they're not operational, and then also what's required for public safety. And so we've tried to bake that in. What we don't want to have here are huge billboards with 24/7 lights. As you think about a lot of our gas stations or convenience stores, big bright lights. We really want to try to tone that down. That also helps in a lot of ways. Adjacent homes have really talked about and are concerned about lighting and in particular light pollution. We also know that light pollution is a detriment to our natural world and our wildlife. So we're really trying to bring what we believe is the forefront of thought around this to this project. It's an emerging science and an emerging best practice in zoning. And then subdivision of land, we're really focused on intentional, but then also kind of rooted in the city's UDO, thinking about how properties accessed, where trails go, where paths go, sidewalks, requiring all those things to work together as part of a network. We talked with the Trail Advocacy Group about the need for trail crossings and intersections, and so we've built in some standards thinking through how we can create safe crossings. There's a number of road sections within this ordinance as well that will serve as a guidepost as existing roads are improved, but then also as new roads are built. And then I mentioned, and I'll mention again, a lot of these developments are going to require a traffic impact study, and we've baked that requirement into this PUD. I won't spend a lot of time on roads because I want to get to a lot of those other components of the ordinance. But, as part of the master plan, we have identified improvements to existing roads as well as the ability for some new roads to be created, both that are located on this map, but then also the flexibility for these new roads to take on these various different road types as development plans come to the table. And that would be a close collaboration with the Property Owners Association and the city, and of course you all as those petitions come together in the future. And if we think about roads, it's really about how do we bring this together, how do we manage stormwater, how do we create significant buffers, berming, but then also how do we provide good quality pedestrian infrastructure in a way that also allows for traffic to flow in a way that we need it and doesn't cause an issue. So I won't spend a lot of time on these, but we have a whole host of different corridors that are defined in the ordinance, as well as different road types that are illustrated in the design guidelines. And so thinking through how really we can be intentional as we improve, but then also as we build new roads, so that we're really bringing something to the community that's in the benefit of this whole district, but then also thinking intentionally about how this all works together. I talked a lot about stormwater, I think, but we're really excited about how this is a best practice and how it can also create these innovative stormwater district type retention and detention strategies. So we definitely respect the state and the city's requirements, and we're going above and beyond. 35% of stormwater must be retained or detained on site. But then for that other stormwater, we're really trying to push the envelope. Stormwater banks is something that's emerging throughout the country. So the idea there is, and this ordinance enables it, a group such as the owners organization could create a district, and within that district, stormwater credits could be bought by an individual user. They could essentially pay an impact fee into that. Then they would have a portion of the site that would be off-site of their own, where their stormwater needs would be dealt with. It would not be a giant pond. It would be naturalized. I talked about stream corridors and things like that. You could have wetlands built along those corridors. And the idea there is that if you combine that with wetland mitigation, and we've had Christopher Burke looking at that. They are kind of leading on a state level of what's called the ILF, the in lieu fee program through the DNR. The idea there is that if we could have kind of regional stormwater detention, by regional I mean the LEAP district, and then also wetland banking for any impacted wetlands, you start to knit together this green network, okay? And the idea there is that it really could become a part of a significant central park strategy in creating a large area of parkland that has a lot of different resources, both financial and property that could be adding to it and really doing some innovative things for this site. We don't have oceans, we don't have mountains, so we wanted to really try to create something that's really special, and stormwater and prairie, kind of thinking about our creeks and streams is something that, as the master plan was developed, was very important. So as we get to exhibits here, so we went through, I would say, the bulk of the kind of the design guidelines as well as the PUD itself. We've got a use table, the parking, concept plan. So we've explained a lot of that. The legal description is many, many pages. I don't know that anybody wants to look at that tonight, but it's all prepared. It's within kind of the full ordinance there. And as we're looking through the process, we've also developed what we call a flow chart. It's modeled after what the city does already in the PUD process, but a couple things that are important here as when this, developer XYZ comes to the table, let's say, the process that they need to follow is what I would call twofold. So there's a pre-filing meeting, which is required today, an application, and then there's what's called administrative review and approval. So the idea there is there's an architectural review committee that's set forth in the declarations for the development itself, the development agreements. all those things need to be reviewed against the master plan and the design guidelines before they get to a point where that group would do a letter of support. That letter of support then would get forwarded to the city, and then the city would begin the TAC process. So the idea is that the Architectural Review Committee would be one more level of sign-off, and that group would have representatives from the city as well as the owners' organization and the county to really make sure that comments are addressed even before it gets to TAC. Then from TAC, the plans would be modified, there'd be staff review, any required hearings, and then, you know, ultimately speaking, a development would be approved. So that's the process we've set up here. We've been working closely with Ben and his staff, as well as the IEDC, and trying to understand how we can create a process that has a lot of different layers of review. So with that, I've talked a lot, and would welcome questions, or Ben, I don't know if there's anything you want to add, or Scott, before we turn it over.
Any questions from the commission? Okay, go ahead. Thank you. Okay. We will open this to public hearing. Make sure you sign in and keep it within 3 minutes, please.
Cindy Holmes, not a city resident, but a county resident concerned. All these plans sound so wonderful, and I'm glad they're taking such great detail on protecting the natural area. I really look forward to that. I hope it works. But what I've seen in the past is you make all the rules, you make these guidelines, but then they don't get enforced, they get variances. Everybody asks for variances. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to skip over this little detail. We're going to do something else and give them permission to do that. If you make this policy, stick to it. If it's good for the city, stick to it. And stop making exceptions and giving people what they want like you did with Lily.
Thank you.
Hi, Jody Stewart, 4548 West 50 South. A lot of these people out here are probably my neighbors. I don't know them, but that's the reason I bought my property, is so I could be in the country, so I could see corn, soybeans, wildlife, everything else. You guys are approving so many big buildings coming into this town, and it's sad. It really is. I spent 20 years building my dream home, only for you guys now to be coming in and wanting to develop and put concrete buildings around me. It's sad, very sad. I hope that you guys don't pass this.
Any other public comments or questions?
If I may, I'll comment, then I'll sign in after to be more efficient.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Brian Daggy, 2005 West, 250 North, Lebanon. Really, I only have a couple quick things. One, is the intention to vote on this tonight, then move it on to council next week?
We just make a recommendation to the council.
But the intention is to make that recommendation tonight, correct? Or are you looking
Yes.
for that anyway? Given that this is, use your words, maybe one of the most complex PUD plans put together in Indiana. And the fact it's been available for the public to view for, I think, 5, maybe 6 days now, and the complexity, the whole new series of setbacks and how law calculates into, I would request that you table this till the next meeting to give more opportunities for the public, as well as maybe yourself, to get some comments and review this thing very thoroughly. I'm not going to say it's good or bad or indifferent, but given the scope and complexity and the impact and what it's going to have on the city of Lebanon and the county as a whole, I think it deserves to wait at least another meeting to give everybody a chance to review, make intelligent comments, and let you make the best decision possible. That'd be my request to you.
Thank you, Brian.
You can sign in after if you'd like.
Hello, my name's Richie Keith. My wife and I bought our house at 964 North, 500 West. It's a corner house at 32 and 500, southwest corner. We bought it to be closer to my son when he was at Lebanon High School. Also, I was raised in Boone County and liked the school myself. I went there a long time ago, 1984. And our plan was to have our kids go there, which we have a 13-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter who now go to Western Boone. And our plan was to buy this house 4 miles outside of Lebanon. And I know development is a thing, but 4 miles, we're going to jump from Lebanon city limits out 4 miles and make this the new Lebanon. And I don't even know what it means for my house yet. I look at these projects and I don't understand them sometimes, but my house isn't there in the projects I've seen. I've not been approached. My kids say, "Are we going to be leaving, Dad? We moving?" I don't know what it means when I see some kind of little development and a curve in 500 where there's not a curve there, and then 500 doesn't go across. So I hope we table this and get some more people and discuss some of these things that I know are important to me as well as my neighbors across the corner at 32 and 500 on the northeast side, because they don't know any more than I do, and I'm not sure why they didn't make it. We just had a lawnmower meeting just the other day, and we were all mowing our grass and asking questions, and they said, "You got a letter, right?" I said, "Yeah, we haven't picked it up." We did, and we want to be here, but I hope everybody has a time to come in and see what exactly is going on and take the time to say, is this what we want, And it's not just me being selfish. I've got a string of houses. I grew up with friends on this same road, and now it shows it doesn't even go to Hazel Rig. So it's a little confusing to some of us who are not in politics or land development, and I'd like to see some more explanation, some more openness to everybody who's affected by this, even if they don't know they're affected yet, because once it's too late, right? So I'm hoping that it's not too late now before we can get some explanation on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments or questions? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. The applicant like to make any comments, or Ben, would you like to address first?
I'll defer to Ben on some of a couple of the Plan Commission-based comments. Mr. Daggy, I believe indicated that he wanted to see some additional time for consideration here. I understand that folks would like to keep discussions going for whatever reasons, but I would point out this. I would point out that we were here last month, and that was publicly noticed and went through generally what this would be. I would also point out that we had an open house where everything that has been presented here in substance was on boards, and then we had multiple folks for 3 hours there to answer questions. I'd also point out that we're still available, and I'll stay here afterwards to answer any folks' questions like the last gentleman that spoke. and we're happy to do that. We're invested in this financially, we're invested in this as public policy, we're invested in this with the city. And so we want to maintain that communication with respect to that, and that will continue. It will continue after tonight. And again, we request that action be taken with respect to this, which is why we didn't ask for action to be taken during the last meeting, because we wanted to season this. We wanted to have an open house. We wanted to solicit comments from folks. And we incorporated those comments. I wanted to provide that context. If there's any additional questions, let me know.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay. Ben?
And Ben, just to clarify before you go, this body will just provide a favorable, unfavorable, or no recommendation, and that's our job tonight, right?
Yeah, so that's the role of the Plan Commission, is to provide a recommendation that gets forwarded to the council. So we're kind of in the middle of the process, if you will, right now with what the Plan Commission does. So we have had two meetings thus far, as Scott had mentioned. We've asked people for comments if they have any questions to reach out to our office. At this point, I've had one person reach out with a couple of general comments, but no specific comments related to the ordinance. So we have been available, haven't received anything thus far. But in terms of the Plan Commission's role is not to approve the ordinance. This is not the last step. This is the recommendation. Certainly, we could go through further detail if need be on anything you want to look at. We just want to make sure you guys are comfortable. And to say that we've reviewed this, spent a significant amount of time reviewing this to make sure that the city is comfortable with this is an understatement. We spent many, many hours over the last month, had a number of meetings with the consulting team, including one about 3 hours ago, just to make sure that we all understood exactly what was being presented to you guys tonight, and we're all comfortable with it. So we spent a lot of hours on this, making sure that the city was on board with everything that was being presented to you tonight. So this is a city project that's coming to you. But so yeah, your role is not, this is not the final step in this process. Your role is to provide that recommendation, and the council over the course of the next month essentially will provide additional context to it and ultimately be the ones that would adopt or reject the ordinance.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Speak a minute to the comment that one person made about things.
Microphone. She needs a microphone.
Sorry. Could you speak to the comment about how guidelines get approved and then variances are made later and make changes? Could you address that?
Yeah, so I would say every project comes forward with variances, but we do have an occasion where a site, there's something unique about the site or the project that our ordinance doesn't really contemplate. And I would say Lilly was one of those, because our ordinance didn't contemplate a 600-acre multi-building development like that, where you know, their dock door may face the interstate, but it's 1,500 feet away from it. And our ordinance just says that it can't face the interstate, even though there's really very little chance you're going to see the dock door from that far away. So there's just some unique things like that where you will see things come forward. It's not our intention for anybody to get a variance that comes in this development, but every one of them is unique, and we'll look at it. And I would say that of the people that come in and ask for variances, probably only less than 50% of them actually even end up in front of the Plan Commissioner board. So we oftentimes will discourage people from that process if it's not something we can support, and really only looking at things that are specifically unique about a development or a project that we feel like it warrants that request. But we certainly do not encourage people to go through that process. We're really trying to make sure that these standards are written in such a way so you don't really have to do that, and we're getting the right kind of development out here.
Thank you.
Just for clarity, when they ask for a variance, it's a tiered process, right? It's going to go to the BZA. It's
Yeah,
gonna come
that's
here.
again another process where there would be notification that goes out to everybody involved. They'll know exactly what's being requested. We review those things, and we vet those. We make recommendations and place conditions on those and make sure that we're getting something that we're comfortable with as well. But yeah, that's a whole separate process. That's a public process as well. It's not something that's administrative.
And Ben, just to point out too, so you mentioned 50%. I think what a lot of folks need to remember is the first stop is across the hallway, right? So the very first stop in this building is to go and talk to the planning department. Those folks are talking to 10 times the number of businesses that come in front of us. So when Ben's talking about 50% or less get the variance, it's because prior to getting to us, they've already been in contact with the city. They've had those conversations, and some sort of a resolution was made, whether it be, hey, let's move your sign 10 feet this way, and then it's not a variance. You know, those are small things that you can do at the city level before it gets in front of a body like this. So, yes, when an item comes to us, they've exhausted everything that they can do to stay within the walls, if you will. And that's where this board makes that determination on if it's in the best interest of the city. So, just wanted to clarify that 50%, because I think there was some confusion.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times what we're doing is if somebody is requesting X, then we're asking for Y in exchange. So, you know, you want this to be X feet taller, then we want a berm placed here. You're not required to do that, but this is what we want to try to offset some of those challenges. So we're always looking for ways to, even if the variance makes sense, where we're really trying to minimize the impact that even might be seen from that. So we're always negotiating and trying to make sure we're getting something that's quality, even if there's some sort of request that's needed. It's never our intention to encourage or direct people to the variance process. We're really looking for projects that are able to meet the ordinance. Will that always happen? No. I'm sure there's something unique that'll come up that we hadn't considered when we wrote this several hundred-page document. It's always possible there's something unique that comes up, but it's our intention that everybody's able to meet this ordinance.
Thank you, Ben. Any further questions for Ben or the applicant?
I got questions, but I'm not sure who addressed one or both of you, or the IEDC or you. Like I said, I just look at a couple sections here. I mean, first one, as I said, there's something here that actually says that the city UDO will be overridden by this PUD in certain ordinances.
Where they have a standard that's written in here that conflicts with our ordinance, the PUD ordinance would apply. If it is not specifically addressed in their PUD ordinance, the UDO will still apply. So really all that's just suggesting was if they have written something that either is something different than, or maybe perhaps above than our standard in the UDO, the ordinance standard would apply. So that's what that's intended to suggest. Not that they're saying that they're not going to follow the ordinance at all. It's really just suggesting where there is something written in that PUD ordinance that's specific, that may be contradictory in some way, shape, or form to our ordinance. The PUD ordinance would be the governing text.
Along those lines, I'm thinking, so we have something that's not in our PUD ordinance for general use, whether it's allowed, permitted or not permitted, or conditional. And then they want to put it in their PUD. Would that still have to come through us, through the city first, to add it even to their PUD?
If there's any amendment to this PUD ordinance, this would come back through the Plan Commission and Council process. It would go through the same process we're doing right now. Yep. Yeah, it's not something that could be administratively done. It would go back through this approval process.
Okay, another question would actually be, it's not even defined in here how the Architectural Review Committee is structured, how many members are from where.
There's actually a separate document that does that. Maybe one of the exhibits, I don't know. Yeah.
The LEAP, Project LEAP area, which does include the Lilly property, has an association. It's very common to do this. You can think of it as a homeowners association, but this is made up of businesses and is patterned after the association at the Research Triangle in North Carolina. That association is made up of a board that has 5 entities: a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, members at large, and then it has an architectural review committee. On that committee, there are 5 folks, and those folks are appointed. There will be 3 appointed by the developer, which is IEDC at this point, until it's turned over to all of the associations or all of the members once the development occurs.
Okay.
There is 1 appointment from the county, and currently that is Commissioner Wolf from the county. There is 1 appointment on the Architectural Review Committee from the city, and Ben, I believe that is you. So in that flow chart, before it even gets to the city, the entity, the developer, Lilly, other entities, Project Goldfinch, they may have higher standards or different standards, more stringent standards on what they want to see for their overall development, like the Research Triangle. It has to get through that process, and once it does, then it goes to the city. So it's that additional level of review before it even gets to the city. And so that's the Architectural Review Committee. And again, the city will always have a representative of that 5-member committee, and so will the county, because even though the county is not part of the LEAP district, because that's city area, they can be adjacent to it. So we want their input.
Okay.
Does that?
Answers that question. The
Okay.
other thing I had is something, the combined hearing procedure. It's not in that flow chart anywhere. How does that work? It seems like it's. I'll let you do it.
So maybe just to build off what Scott said, so just to make sure everybody understands, the Architecture Review Committee's approval does not replace the city's approval process. So that's in addition to, so like, for example, the Lebanon Business Park, until Duke walked away from that project, had a review committee that reviewed architecture before and had to get their approval before it came to the city for approval process. So this is something that's in addition to the city's review process. We're not required to approve it just because the Architecture Review Committee approved it. That's just an additional step. Just want to make sure to clarify that.
I was more looking for the makeup and how it works.
Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that review committee does not replace the city's review process, and there's no requirement that the city approves the development just because the review committee had already approved it or provided their support. So I just want to make sure that was clear. But
That's what I wanted to clarify for everybody too. So the Architectural Review Committee is not the body to issue variances to the PUD.
Correct.
So they can't throw out the rules and.
Right, they're just they're like the first or second step before it even goes into the city process from the
Yes.
planning department.
Yep.
Okay.
So, and then what was the follow-up question about?
The combined hearing procedure seems it's nowhere in that flow chart anywhere as to how that would work.
Maybe I'm just, is it related to the hearing officer? Yeah. Yeah, so the hearing officer, right now, I don't actually anticipate we're going to need to use this process. So communities, once their level of activity starts getting more significant, for items that are relatively straightforward, they will use a hearing officer process. Really, the only difference is that it would be a single individual that would review those. It's still a public meeting. It's still noticed the same way we do the standard Plan Commission or BZA meeting, but it takes some of those kind of regular requests we get off of the full Plan Commission or BZA's agenda into a more streamlined, it's not really more streamlined, it's still, again, the same noticing requirements, et cetera, but it kind of allows the big issues to come to the Plan Commission and BZA and some of the more straightforward requests to go through the hearing officer process. Typically, the hearing officer is the planning director or his designee in the office, and that would be just a separate meeting. Like I said, I don't anticipate this being necessary in the near future. If we start getting to the point where there's 15 items on the Plan Commission agenda, and we're starting to get here until 11:30 midnight on Plan Commission meetings, we may start looking at using the hearing officer to review some of those more straightforward requests. But for right now, if we have 3, 4, 5 item agendas, I don't see that being necessary. We wanted to write that in there because there are a lot of communities now that they're getting so busy that they've got it. I know Westfield uses it. I think Carmel uses it as well.
An example?
We already have a hearing officer. Maybe Ben, you want to?
Yeah, I think the process is already set up. We just don't use it because we haven't had a need to. For example, if there was a primary plat where they're taking 2 existing parcels and they're replatting them into a single parcel and it requires a primary plat approval, right now that's something that would come to the Plan Commission. And that's really it's a baby step above an administrative review to make sure that the lot meets our lot standard requirements. That's something that could go to the hearing officer for approval. The public would still be notified that there's some change taking place, but it's something that's a very straightforward, objective review, if you will, that it makes more sense for the hearing officer to review and approve those so it doesn't have to be an item on the agenda for the Plan Commission.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but our current hearing officer was really more set up for code enforcement reviews.
Yeah.
And where is the hearing officer defined and appointed,
It's defined in this ordinance, and we're also looking at adding it back to our UDO. We're actually still in the middle of a UDO update, if you will, too. So we'll also make sure it's further defined there. Like I said, it's typically the planning director or his designee in the office So it would be me or one of our other planners, which right now Matt's the only other planner. So we got a short list of people to choose from right now.
Right. Got it.
My other question would be on parking structures. I assume in the dense portion of this, in the mixed use, whatever's not mentioned in 6.5B will just go back to Lebanon's UDO.
Yes. Yep. There's the potential that some of these larger users may want to do parking structures also. I mean, if they've got 3,000 employees or something like that, and they don't want to do that acreage of parking, they may choose to do parking structures also. But yeah, we anticipate primarily it will be in the mixed-use area.
Yeah, thank you.
I also noticed in the mega site, one of the prohibited uses was healthcare. That's just as a primary use, correct? So if one of the mega users has a
Medical
healthcare
clinic.
within, yeah, they're fine, okay.
And the same thing, like a cafeteria or daycare, and that's one of the things of some of the incentives available from the federal government related
Right,
to
they require
the
daycare.
microchip, that CHIPS Act require them to address daycare needs. And so if it was something that was within that user and for their employees only, that's something that we permit by right as kind of an accessory ancillary use.
Right.
If they
Got
wanted to open it up to the public, that's something different. We'd want to just make sure with some additional level of review. But
Got
those are things that might be accessory ancillary to the primary user and would be permitted.
Anybody else?
Question. Windmills. Right now, the Boone County already has its certain ordinances that prohibit them. That Boone County ordinances would override anything within here at this point still, because Lebanon's just within Boone County. Is that correct? I mean, if somebody wanted to put
Boone County's
Windmill.
ordinances would not apply within the city of Lebanon. City
So
of
if somebody
Lebanon
wanted to put a
ordinances,
windmill on their site.
they would be
For private
regulated by
use.
this
For
PUD
just
ordinance.
the use on that site, they'd be allowed.
Yes, and yes.
Or at least
With,
not-
with the restrictions that are
with the
there in terms of,
restrictions, right.
with the height restrictions, the acreage
Which-
restrictions, et cetera.
Which pretty much make that hard.
Yeah,
because
and-
most of them go up above that. the larger
Way
ones.
higher than what we're talking
Yeah,
about. So in conversations with the team, what we're really looking at some is the emerging technologies in wind, not necessarily the traditional 300-foot tall wind turbines you see. There's other things that are only 50 feet tall or less that, they spin, horizontally
yeah,
rather than
I've seen out
vertically.
west.
We
Yeah, I've
wanted to
seen
make
out
sure that
west.
things like that could be considered.
Right.
We're not anticipating that you're going to see 300, well, certainly we don't allow it, so that's why you wouldn't see it. But we're not contemplating the 300-foot tall wind turbines, and they're not permitted, so. And certainly, if there was anything that would be more of a utility level, it would require, it's a conditional use, it would require additional approval. Again, it's not something that we're anticipating, but we did want to make sure, if it even came up as a discussion point, that there was an additional level of review.
I do have a question on the landscaping, because there's going to be a lot of landscaping. Is it required that then they have a company come in and maintain it? Because I know some of the places out here, we do see a lot of weeds and it's not maintained.
Yeah.
So are we going to make sure that those landscaped areas that look so beautiful are going to be maintained like that?
The quick answer is yes. I don't know that it specifically says they have to hire a company to do it, but there are requirements for maintenance, et cetera, both within the PUD ordinance and then also within some of these additional documents, like the HOA covenants and restrictions have additional requirements in there too. Absolutely.
Okay.
Currently, on that note, the current business park does have one. It will operate very similarly, I would assume, right? It's not an HOA, but whatever they call it.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly what form or function it has now that Duke isn't associated with the park, but yeah, they have had an HOA historically for the business park that, again, reviewed architecture and also responsible for maintaining public spaces, et cetera, so.
Anything else? Got anything else?
I would just say finally, what we're looking for tonight is we're requesting a recommendation from the Plan Commission that would then be forwarded to the council for consideration of the PUD ordinance. So if you have any questions about that, but I think we provided a recommendation in the staff report for you.
Okay. Scott, Aaron, anything? Yeah. Entertain a recommendation for council.
I'll make a motion that we forward the PUD rezone and ordinance to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
I got a motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay.
Noted.
Recommendation moves forward favorably. Next up on the agenda, we have docket 23-46. It is the amendment to the Lebanon Comprehensive Plan to incorporate the LEAP Innovation District. Ben?
We'll be very quick on this one. I know that the presentation isn't quite as extensive here as what it was the PUD ordinance. So this is another activity or element associated with the PUD ordinance, and this is our comprehensive plan, which is our future planning document for the city. And certainly, as we've talked about a couple different times when we went through this process 4 or 5 years ago, there were a number of opportunities that we didn't contemplate at that time that we now want to memorialize in the comprehensive plan. The first thing, just based on the activity that's taking place right now, is we wanted to make sure that the LEAP district vision and goals were memorialized in our comprehensive plan. And so that's the step we're going through right now, is to look at the overall LEAP district concept plan area, which actually is larger than the PUD ordinance area. We're looking at future land use potential in that entire 9,000 acre area. Make sure we get that future land use, anticipated future land use in the comprehensive plan, and then also put some of those additional concept planning standards that we've already talked through a lot of tonight already related to land uses and the definitions of land uses and roads and utilities and transportation, all that stuff. Get that in our comprehensive plan. For those that maybe weren't part of that process 4 or 5 years ago, we actually have a digital comprehensive plan. It's a website. So what we'd be looking to do is once we get this adopted, is that we would make the updates to that website to add the new future land use map and all the additional standards and goal vision and goals associated with the LEAP district. So that's a real quick overview of what we're looking to do the comprehensive plan. As I mentioned earlier, this again requires a recommendation from the Plan Commission, then it would be adopted via resolution by the council, theoretically at their next meeting, which is next Monday evening. So with that, again, I'll turn it back over to Aaron to quickly go through a couple slides with you.
Thank you, and I promise I won't take as long. So, good to be back before you with this update here. We did have materials available and took public comment on this future land use and comprehensive plan update as part of the community open house we had back in June. So I know we talked about this once before. This is kind of the official process through the state as assigned by statute to really think about a guidance document. So as Ben mentioned, this is really thinking through what that future land use for this area and what the LEAP district will be. So it really is memorializing the thought that was put forward as part of the LEAP master plan. Ultimately, the land uses are then codified as part of the PUD. And the goal here, as Ben mentioned, would be this land use update as well as the LEAP Lebanon master plan would be available on the city's website for public review and consideration. So the process we went through follows statute, and it updates the future land use map to include the newly annexed property and the kind of area identified as part of the master plan. We've looked into and provided recommendations on initiatives and objectives that then match the master plan in the district. And we had the community open house. Again, this is following a similar process than that of the PUD, but it would be adopted by the council via resolution as opposed to ordinance, so it's a little different there. And then as Ben mentioned, all this would be public on the website. That's a great way for people to be able to view and learn about these changes, as well as stay tuned for future updates on the process. So the current comprehensive plan, and you can see kind of the circle on the top left of the northwest, the LEAP district, it wasn't detailed in the prior comprehensive plan. So really this is bringing forward what was considered as part of the LEAP master plan. And this is a typical process when a master plan or an area plan is done. A lot of times communities then update their comprehensive plan with those recommendations. In this case, it's the larger LEAP Innovation District. And then within that district, as we talked about with the PUD, there's a number of sub-districts or sub-areas that have additional descriptions and identification of information that is helpful as the community considers the future development of this area. So with that in mind, I think we talked a little bit already about the schedule, but we hope for a favorable recommendation, and then the ability to advance this to council here on the 24th. Happy to answer any questions.
Real quick, just to clarify, so you show us the map of the LEAP Innovation District, and one of the questions that came up earlier was, what's the timeline? And from my interpretations, when we look at these maps with the boundaries that don't include houses, that sort of thing, I mean, we're talking 10, 15, 20, maybe plus years from today, right? Like these are master vision maps, not something that's going to happen tomorrow, right?
That's correct, and oftentimes, a comprehensive plan, most communities endeavor to adopt their comprehensive plan anywhere from every 5 to 10 years. We definitely think of communities like Lebanon, where there's a lot of growth and change, that, the 5-year timeline is right. So the idea is, this is the future land use recommendation. This is a recommendation based on planning that's occurred in this area, and that we would anticipate it be updated, every couple years as conditions or projects may change. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Anything else for Aaron? Yeah, Ben?
Yeah, just to reemphasize a couple things, this is a policy document. This isn't an ordinance. This isn't a law. So this future land use map doesn't change zoning. It doesn't require or force things to be annexed. Doesn't even encourage people to annex necessarily. This really just says is if property either already within the city or annexed to the city at some point in the future, this is what we right now envision as being the land use that we anticipate on this site. So properties that are currently in the county, they're still in the county, they're still zoned by the county. For those in the city, that just says, we're not changing the zoning right now necessarily, but this is what we anticipate being generally the future land use. So this is really just a policy document as we're making decisions and offering guidance in our office, and then as we take projects through planning commission council processes, we can look back to this and say, hey, this is what we felt like at the time was appropriate. Maybe it still is appropriate, maybe it's not, but this does not formally change anything about zoning or land use on a property. This is just what we think is from a policy perspective, what we envision being the future development for this area.
Thank you, Ben. Questions or comments? Public hearing. This is a public hearing. Entertain comments or questions about the proposed docket. Open it. Seeing anybody step forward, we will close it. Further comment or questions from the council?
I have one for Ben.
Yes, sir.
Actually, just a compliment for very thorough. Gotta like that. Just one question. What was the thought process on the one area I'm just looking at? It's really the only area that's really boundaried by anything that's a subdivision at this point. It's that area south of 300 and just east of Witt Road.
Okay.
Can you show that?
What was the thought process for putting that in the LEAP? Really up against adjacent to what we know as a subdivision.
Can you
Instead of
pushing
it up to 300.
If they could put the map back up, we could kind of point to where we're talking about. So that would be the area right here, for those unfamiliar with the north side of town.
Right.
This is
Right by
Sunbrook
Sunbrook
Villas that
Village.
you see right here. So you got an area between Sunbrook Villas and 300 North. I think really what we're looking there, I mean, obviously, those aren't significantly sized sites, so we'd be looking for more, I would say, transitional type LEAP district uses. And some of those areas, certainly, as you know, there's going to be an interchange in there, so some of that, the boundaries of the roads, et cetera, are going to theoretically change at some point. But really, the idea was there is we've got the existing developed area, and then this area along the 300 North corridor, which we think is going to be ripe for some sort of some LEAP-oriented development, whether that would be other service or other type of entertainment uses or whatever. But that was really the intention there, is look at that 300 North corridor as being where the LEAP district kind of started in that area, based around the 300 North corridor.
So, I mean, actually, they're connected. I mean, even though it's there and it says it's potentially going to be used for, like what Lily's being used for, it could actually be zoned
Yeah,
It'd be
this is
commercial
really just-
residential or something.
Yeah, this is really just broadly suggesting, and like I said, this is just a policy document. This is not zoning, so this is not rezoning that to LEAP necessarily.
Right.
This is really just saying broadly that we think this is something associated with the LEAP Innovation District. And once we dig down into further details of what makes most sense along that 300 North corridor, then those obviously all come back through our approval process, and we'd have, further review of those things. But this is just a policy document that suggests that 300 North corridor should be something LEAP associated, whether it's something Eli Lilly related or a use like that, or something that supports the LEAP district.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anything else? Ben, Aaron, Scott?
Nope, just again, a reminder that we're looking for a recommendation tonight from the Plan Commission to forward this to council.
Well, thank you guys for putting a well-thought-out plan, being very available to everybody. Ben, you and your staff always do a good job. We'll look for a recommendation to move this to the council.
I motion we forward docket 23-46, the LEAP Innovation District Comprehensive Plan Amendment to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation.
I'll second.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Any abstains? Moves forward with the favorable. I'm not seeing any other business tonight. Anybody have anything else?
Maybe just for those in the audience again, we're still taking comments. If anybody has any questions, or you're still reviewing this and have comments or questions, please send them my way. We'll work with the development team, the consulting team, to get them addressed prior to the council meetings if there's anything we can. But please continue to reach out to our office. We'd be happy to answer questions or address comments if there are any.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, our next meeting will be Monday, August the 21st. Good night, guys.
Hey, Dan.